The Idyl of Miss Sara Brown. Of all the high players this country ever sees, there is no doubt but that the guy they call the Sky is the highest. In fact, the reason he is called the Sky is because he goes so high when it comes to betting on any proposition whatever. He will bet all he has, and nobody can bet any more than this. His right name is Obadiah Masterson, and he is originally out of a little town in southern Colorado where he learns to shoot craps and play cards and one thing and another, and where his old man is a very well-known citizen and something of a sport himself. In fact, the Sky tells me that when he finally cleans up all the loose scratch around his hometown and decides he needs more room, his old man has a private talk with him and says to him like this: "Son," the old guy says, "you are now going out into the wide, wide world to make your own way, and it is a very good thing to do, as there are no more opportunities for you in this burg. I am only sorry," he says, "that I am not able to bankroll you to a very large start. But," he says, "not having any potatoes to give you, I am now going to stake you to some very valuable advice, which I personally collect in my years of experience around and about, and I hope and trust that you will always bear this advice in mind. Son," the old guy says, "no matter how far you travel or how smart you get, always remember this. Someday, somewhere," he says, "a guy is going to come to you and show you a nice brand new deck of cards on which the seal is never broken. And this guy is going to offer to bet you that the Jack of Spades will jump out of this deck and squirt cider in your ear. But son," the old guy says, "do not bet him, for as sure as you do, you are going to get an earful of cider." Well, the Sky remembers what his old man says, and he is always very cautious about betting on such propositions as the Jack of Spades jumping out of a sealed deck of cards and squirting cider in his ear, and so he makes few mistakes as he goes along. In fact, the only real mistake the Sky makes is when he hits St. Louis after leaving his hometown, and loses all his potatoes betting a guy St. Louis is the biggest town in the world. Now, of course, this is before the Sky ever sees any bigger towns, and he is never much of a hand for reading up on matters such as this. In fact, the only reading the Sky ever does as he goes along through life is in these Gideon Bibles, such as he finds in the hotel rooms where he lives, for the Sky never lives anywhere else but in hotel rooms for years. He tells me that he reads many items of great interest in these Gideon Bibles, and furthermore, the Sky says that several times these Gideon Bibles keep him from getting out of line, such as the time he finds himself pretty much frozen over in Cincinnati, what with owing everybody in town except maybe the mayor from playing games of chance of one kind and another. Well, the Sky says he has no way of meeting these obligations, and he is figuring the only thing he can do is to take a run-out powder, when he happens to read in one of these Gideon Bibles where it says like this: "Better is it," the Gideon Bible says, "that thou shouldst not vow, than that thou shouldst vow and not pay." Well, the Sky says he can see that there is no doubt whatever, but that this means a guy shall not welch. So he remains in Cincinnati until he manages to wiggle himself out of the situation, and from that day to this, the Sky never thinks of welching. He is maybe 30 years old and is a tall guy with a round kisser and big baby blue eyes, and he always looks as innocent as a little baby. But the Sky is by no means as innocent as he looks. In fact, the Sky is smarter than 3 Philadelphia lawyers, which makes him very smart indeed. And he is well established as a high player in New Orleans and Chicago and Los Angeles and wherever else there is any action in the way of card playing or crap shooting or horse racing or betting on the baseball games, for the Sky is always moving around the country following the action. But while the Sky will bet on anything whatever, he is more of a short card player and a crap shooter than anything else. And furthermore, he is a great hand for propositions such as always are coming up among citizens who follow games of chance for a living. Many citizens prefer betting on propositions to anything you can think of, because they figure a proposition gives them a chance to outsmart somebody. And in fact, I know citizens who will sit up all night making up propositions to offer other citizens the next day. A proposition may be only a problem in cards, such as what is the price against a guy getting aces back-to-back, or how often a pair of deuces will win a hand in stud. But then again, it may be some very daffy proposition indeed, although the daffier any proposition seems to be, the more some citizens like it. And no one ever sees the Sky when he does not have some proposition of his own. The first time he ever shows up around this town, he goes to a baseball game at the Polo Grounds with several prominent citizens. And while he is at the ball game, he buys himself a sack of Harry Stevens peanuts, which he dumps in the side pocket of his coat. He is eating these peanuts all through the game, and after the game is over and he is walking across the field with the citizens, he says to them like this: "What price?" the Sky says. "I cannot throw a peanut from second base to home plate." Well, everybody knows that a peanut is too light for anybody to throw this far, so Big Nig the crapshooter, who always likes to have a little the best of it running for him, speaks as follows. "You can have 3-1 from me, stranger," Big Nig says. "Two C's against 6, the Sky says. Then he stands on second base and takes a peanut out of his pocket, and not only whips it to the home plate, but on into the lap of a fat guy who was still sitting in the grandstand putting the zing on Bill Terry for not taking Walker out of the box when Walker is getting a pasting from the other club. Well, naturally, this is a most astonishing throw indeed, but afterwards it comes out that the Sky throws a peanut loaded with lead. And of course it is not one of Harry Stevens' peanuts either, as Harry is not selling peanuts full of lead at a dime a bag, with the price of lead what it is. It is only a few nights after this that the Sky states another most unusual proposition to a group of citizens sitting in Mindy's restaurant, when he offers to bet a C-note that he can go down into Mindy's cellar and catch a live rat with his bare hands. And everybody is greatly astonished when Mindy himself steps up and takes the bet, for ordinarily Mindy will not bet you a nickel that he is alive. But it seems that Mindy knows that the Sky plants a tame rat in the cellar, and that this rat knows the Sky and loves him dearly, and will let him catch it any time he wishes. And it also seems that Mindy knows that one of his dishwashers happens upon this rat, and not knowing it is tame, knocks it flatter than a pancake. So when the Sky goes down into the cellar and starts trying to catch a rat with his bare hands, he is greatly surprised how inhospitable the rat turns out to be, because it is one of Mindy's personal rats, and Mindy is around afterwards saying he will lay plenty of 7-5 against even Strangler Lewis being able to catch one of his rats with his bare hands or with boxing gloves on. I am only telling you this to show you what a smart guy the Sky is, and I am only sorry I do not have time to tell you about many other very remarkable propositions that he thinks up outside of his regular business. It is well known to one and all that he is very honest in every respect, and that he hates and despises cheaters at cards or dice, and furthermore the Sky never wishes to play with any the best of it himself, or anyway not much. He will never take the inside of any situation, as many gamblers love to do, such as owning a gambling house and having the percentage run for him instead of against him. For always the Sky is strictly a player, because he says he will never care to settle down in one spot long enough to become the owner of anything. In fact, in all the years the Sky is drifting around the country, nobody ever knows him to own anything except maybe a bankroll. And when he comes to Broadway the last time, which is the time I am now speaking of, he has 100 G's in cash money and an extra suit of clothes, and this is all he has in the world. He never owns such a thing as a house or an automobile or a piece of jewelry. He never owns a watch, because the Sky says time means nothing to him. Of course, some guys will figure 100 G's comes under the head of owning something. But as far as the Sky is concerned, money is nothing but just something for him to play with, and the dollars may as well as be donuts as far as the value goes with him. The only time the Sky ever thinks of money is when he is broke, and the only way he can tell he is broke is when he reaches into his pocket and finds nothing there but his fingers. Then it is necessary for the Sky to go out and dig up some fresh scratch somewhere, and when it comes to digging up scratch, the Sky is practically supernatural. He can get more potatoes on the strength of a telegram to some place or other than John D. Rockefeller can get on collateral, for everybody knows the Sky's word is as good as wheat in a bin. Now one Sunday evening, the Sky is walking along Broadway, and at the corner of 49th Street he comes upon a little bunch of mission workers who are holding a religious meeting, such as mission workers love to do of a Sunday evening. The idea being that they may round up a few sinners here and there, although personally, I always claim the mission workers come out too early to catch any sinners on this part of Broadway. At such an hour the sinners are still in bed, resting up from their sinning of the night before, so they will be in good shape for more sinning a little later on. There are only 4 of these mission workers, and 2 of them are old guys, and one is an old doll, while the other is a young doll who is tootling on a cornet. And after a couple of ganders at this young doll, the Sky is a goner. For this is one of the most beautiful young dolls anybody ever sees on Broadway, and especially as a mission worker. Her name is Miss Sara Brown. She is tall and thin and has a first-class shape, and her hair is a light brown going on blonde, and her eyes are like I do not know what, except that they are 100% eyes in every respect. Furthermore, she is not a bad cornet player, if you like cornet players, although at this spot on Broadway she has to play against a scat band in a chop suey joint nearby, and this is tough competition. Although, at that, many citizens believe Miss Sara Brown will win by a large score if she only gets a little more support from one of the old guys with her who has a big bass drum, but does not pound it hearty enough. Well, the Sky stands there listening to Miss Sara Brown tootling on the cornet for quite a spell, and then he hears her make a speech in which she puts the blast on sin very good and boosts religion quite some. and says if there are any souls around that need saving, the owners of same may step forward at once. But no one steps forward. So the sky comes over to Mindy's restaurant where many citizens are congregated and starts telling us about Miss Sara Brown. But of course we already know about Miss Sara Brown because she is so beautiful and so good. Furthermore, everybody feels somewhat sorry for Miss Sara Brown, for while she is always tootling the cornet and making speeches and looking to save any souls that need saving, she never seems to find any souls to save. Or at least her bunch of mission workers never gets any bigger. In fact, it gets smaller, as she starts out with a guy who plays a very fair sort of trombone, but this guy takes it on the lam one night with the trombone, which one and all consider a dirty trick. Now from this time on, the sky does not take any interest in anything but Miss Sara Brown. And any night she is out on the corner with the other mission workers, you will see the sky standing around and looking at her. And naturally, after a few weeks of this, Miss Sara Brown must know the sky is looking at her, or she is dumber than seems possible. And nobody ever figures Miss Sara Brown dumb, as she is always on her toes and seems plenty able to take care of herself, even on Broadway. Sometimes, after the street meeting is over, the sky follows the mission workers to their headquarters in an old storeroom around in 48th Street where they generally hold an indoor session. And I hear the sky drops many a large coarse note in the collection box while looking at Miss Sara Brown. And there is no doubt these notes come in handy around the mission, as I hear business is by no means so good there. It is called the Save a Soul Mission, and it is run mainly by Miss Sara Brown's grandfather, an old guy with whiskers by the name of Arvide Abernathy. But Miss Sara Brown seems to do most of the work, including tootling the cornet and visiting the poor people around and about and all this and that. And many citizens claim it is a great shame that such a beautiful doll is wasting her time being good. How the sky ever becomes acquainted with Miss Sara Brown is a very great mystery. But the next thing anybody knows, he is saying hello to her, and she is smiling at him out of her 100% eyes. And one evening, when I happen to be with the sky, we run into her walking along 49th Street, and the sky hauls off and stops her, and says it is a nice evening, which it is at that. Then the sky says to Miss Sara Brown like this. Well, the sky says, how is the mission dodge going these days? Are you saving any souls, he says. Well, it seems from what Miss Sara Brown says, the soul saving is very slow indeed these days. In fact, Miss Sara Brown says, I worry greatly about how few souls we seem to save. Sometimes I wonder if we are lacking in grace. She goes on up the street, and the sky stands looking after her, and he says to me like this. I wish I can think of some ways to help this little doll, he says, especially, he says, in saving a few souls to build up her mob at the mission. I must speak to her again and see if I can figure something out. But the sky does not get to speak to Miss Sara Brown again because somebody weighs in the sacks on him by telling her he is nothing but a professional gambler, and that he is a very undesirable character, and that his only interest in hanging around the mission is because she is a good-looking doll. So all of a sudden, Miss Sara Brown plays plenty of chill for the sky. Furthermore, she sends him word that she does not care to accept any more of his potatoes in the collection box because his potatoes are nothing but ill-gotten gains. Well, naturally, this hurts Sky's feelings no little, so he quits standing around looking at Miss Sara Brown and going to the mission and takes to mingling again with the citizens in Mindy's and showing some interest in the affairs of the community, especially the crap games. Of course, the crap games that are going on at this time are nothing much because practically everybody in the world is broke. But there is a head-and-head game run by Nathan Detroit over a garage in 52nd Street where there is occasionally some action. And who shows up at this crap game early one evening but the sky? Although it seems he shows up there more to find company than anything else. In fact, he only stands around watching the play and talking with other guys who are also standing around and watching. And many of these guys are very high shots during the gold rush, although most of them are now as clean as a jaybird and maybe cleaner. One of these guys is a guy by the name of Brandy Bottle Bates, who is known from coast to coast as a high player when he has anything to play with, and who is called Brandy Bottle Bates because it seems that years ago he is a great hand for belting a brandy bottle around. This Brandy Bottle Bates is a big black-looking guy with a large beezer and a head shaped like a pear, and he is considered a very immoral and wicked character, but he is a pretty slick gambler and a fast man with a dollar when he is in the money. Well, finally the sky asks Brandy Bottle why he is not playing, and Brandy laughs and states as follows. Why, he says, in the first place, I have no potatoes, and in the second place, I doubt if it will do me much good if I do have any potatoes the way I am going the past year. Why, Brandy Bottle Bates says, I cannot win a bet to save my soul. Now this crack seems to give the sky an idea, as he stands looking at Brandy Bottle very strangely, and while he is looking, Big Nig, the crapshooter, picks up the dice and hits 3 times hard running, bing, bing, bing. Then Big Nig comes out on a 6, and Brandy Bottle Bates speaks as follows. "You see how my luck is," he says. "Here is Big Nig, hotter than a stove, and here I am without a bob to follow him with, especially when he is looking for nothing but a 6. Why," he says, "Nig can make 6s all night when he is hot. If he does not make this 6 the way he is, I will be willing to turn square and quit gambling forever." "Well, Brandy," the Sky says, "I will make you a proposition. I will lay you a G-note Big Nig does not get his 6. I will lay you a G-note against nothing but your soul," he says. "I mean, if Big Nig does not get his 6, you are to turn square and join Miss Sara Brown's mission for 6 months. Bet," Brandy Bottle says right away, meaning the proposition is on, although the chances are he does not quite understand the proposition. All Brandy understands is the Sky wishes to wager that Big Nig does not make his 6, and Brandy Bottle Bates will be willing to bet his soul a couple of times over on Big Nig making his 6, and figure he is getting the best of it at that, as Brandy has great confidence in Nig. Well, sure enough, Big Nig makes the 6, so the Sky weeds Brandy Bottle Bates a G-note, although everybody around is saying the Sky makes a terrible overlay of the natural price in giving Brandy Bottle a G against his soul. Furthermore, everybody around figures the chances are the Sky only wishes to give Brandy an opportunity to get in action, and nobody figures the Sky is on the level about trying to win Brandy Bottle Bates' soul, especially as the Sky does not seem to wish to go any further after paying the bet. He only stands there looking on and seeming somewhat depressed as Brandy Bottle goes into action on his own account with the G-note, fading other guys around the table with cash money. But Brandy Bottle Bates seems to figure what is in the Sky's mind pretty well, because Brandy Bottle is a crafty old guy. It finally comes his turn to handle the dice, and he hits a couple of times, and then he comes out on a 4, and anybody will tell you that a 4 is a very tough point to make, even with a lead pencil. Then Brandy Bottle turns to the Sky and speaks to him as follows. "Well, Sky," he says, "I will take the odds off you on this one. I know you do not want my dough," he says. "I know you only want my soul for Miss Sara Brown. And," he says, without wishing to be fresh about it, "I know why you want it for her. I am young once myself," Brandy Bottle says. "And you know if I lose to you, I will be over there in 48th Street in an hour pounding on the door, for Brandy always settles. But, Sky," he says, "now I am in the money, and my price goes up. Will you lay me 10 G's against my soul I do not make this 4? "Bet," the Sky says, and right away Brandy Bottle hits with a 4. Well, when word goes around that the Sky is up at Nathan Detroit's crap game trying to win Brandy Bottle Bates' soul for Miss Sara Brown, the excitement is practically intense. Somebody telephones Mindy's, where a large number of citizens are sitting around arguing about this and that, and telling one another how much they will bet in support of their arguments, if only they have something to bet, and Mindy himself is almost killed in a rush for the door. One of the first guys out of Mindy's and up to the crap game is Regret, the horse player, and as he comes in, Brandy Bottle is looking for a 9, and the Sky is laying him 12 G's against his soul that he does not make this 9, for it seems Brandy Bottle's soul keeps getting more and more expensive. Well, Regret wishes to bet his soul against a G that Brandy Bottle gets his 9, and is greatly insulted when the Sky cannot figure his price any better than a double saw. But finally Regret accepts this price, and Brandy Bottle hits again. Now many other citizens request a little action from the Sky, and if there is one thing the Sky cannot deny a citizen, it is action. So he says he will lay them according to how he figures their word to join Miss Sara Brown's mission if Brandy Bottle misses out. But about this time, the Sky finds he has no more potatoes on him, being now around 35 G's loser, and he wishes to give markers. But Brandy Bottle says that while ordinarily he will be pleased to extend the Sky this accommodation, he does not care to accept markers against his soul. So then the Sky has to leave the joint and go over to his hotel 2 or 3 blocks away and get the night clerk to open up his damper so the Sky can get the rest of his bankroll. In the meantime, the crap game continues in Nathan Detroit's among the small operators, while the other citizens stand around and say that while they hear of many a daffy proposition in their time, this is the daffiest that ever comes to their attention, although Big Nig claims he hears of a daffier one, but cannot think of what it is. Big Nig claims that all gamblers are daffy anyway, and in fact he says that if they are not daffy, they will not be gamblers. And while he is arguing this matter, back comes the Sky with fresh scratch, and Brandy Bottle Bates takes up where he leaves off, although Brandy says he is accepting the worst of it, as the dice have had a chance to cool off. Now the upshot of the whole business is that Brandy Bottle hits 13 licks in a row, and the last lick he makes is on a 10, and it is for 20 G's against his soul, with about a dozen other citizens getting anywhere from 1 to 5 C's against their souls and complaining bitterly of the price. And as Brandy Bottle makes his 10, I happen to look at the sky, and I see him watching Brandy with a very peculiar expression on his face. And furthermore, I see the Sky's right hand creeping inside his coat, where I know he always packs a Betsy in a shoulder holster, so I can see something is wrong somewhere. But before I can figure out what it is, there is quite a fuss at the door, and loud talking, and a doll's voice. And all of a sudden in bobs nobody else but Miss Sara Brown. It is plain to be seen that she is all steamed up about something. She marches right up to the crap table where Brandy Bottle Bates and the Sky and the other citizens are standing, and one and all are feeling sorry for Dauber, the doorman, thinking of what Nathan Detroit is bound to say to him for letting her in. The dice are still lying on the table, showing Brandy Bottle Bates' last throw, which cleans the Sky and gives many citizens the first means they enjoy in several months. Well, Miss Sara Brown looks at the Sky, and the Sky looks at Miss Sara Brown, and Miss Sara Brown looks at the citizens around and about, and one and all are somewhat dumbfounded, and nobody seems to be able to think of much to say, although the Sky finally speaks up as follows. "Good evening," the Sky says. "It is a nice evening," he says. "I am trying to win a few souls for you around here, but I seem to be about half out of luck." "Well," Miss Sara Brown says, looking at the Sky most severely out of her 100% eyes, "you are taking too much upon yourself. I can win any souls I need myself. You better be thinking of your own soul. By the way," she says, "are you risking your own soul, or just your money?" Well, of course, up to this time the Sky is not risking anything but his potatoes, so he only shakes his head to Miss Sara Brown's question and looks somewhat disorganized. "I know something about gambling," Miss Sara Brown says, "especially about crap games. I ought to," she says. "It ruins my poor papa and my brother Joe. If you wish to gamble for souls, Mr. Sky, gamble for your own soul." Now Miss Sara Brown opens a small black leather pocketbook she is carrying in one hand and pulls out a $2 bill. And it is such a $2 bill as seems to have seen much service in its time. And holding up this deuce, Miss Sara Brown speaks as follows. "I will gamble with you, Mr. Sky," she says. "I will gamble with you," she says, "on the same terms you gamble with these parties here. This $2 against your soul, Mr. Sky. It is all I have, but it is more than your soul is worth." Well, of course anybody can see that Miss Sara Brown is doing this because she is very angry and wishes to make the Sky look small. But right away the Sky's Duke comes from inside his coat, and he picks up the dice and hands them to her and speaks as follows. "Roll them," the Sky says. And Miss Sara Brown snatches the dice out of his hand and gives them a quick sling on the table in such a way that anybody can see she is not a professional crapshooter, and not even an amateur crapshooter, for all amateur crapshooters first breathe on the dice and rattle them good and make remarks to them such as, "Come on, baby." In fact, there is some criticism of Miss Sara Brown afterwards on account of her haste, as many citizens are eager to string with her to hit, while others are just as anxious to bet she misses, and she does not give them a chance to get down. Well, Scranton Slim is the stick guy, and he takes a gander at the dice as they hit up against the side of the table and bounce back. And then Slim hollers, "Winner, winner, winner," as stick guys love to do. And what is showing on the dice is big as life, but a 6 and a 5, which makes 11. So no matter how you figure, the Sky's soul belongs to Miss Sara Brown. She turns at once and pushes through the citizens around the table without even waiting to pick up the deuce she lays down when she grabs the dice. Afterwards, a most obnoxious character by the name of Red Nose Regan tries to claim the deuce as a sleeper and gets the heave-ho from Nathan Detroit, who becomes very indignant about this, stating that Red Nose is trying to give his joint a wrong rap. Naturally, the Sky follows Miss Brown, and Dauber, the doorman, tells me that as they are waiting for him to unlock the door and let them out, Miss Sara Brown turns on the Sky and speaks to him as follows. "You are a fool," Miss Sara Brown says. Well, at this Dauber figures the Sky is bound to let one go, as this seems to be most insulting language. But instead of letting one go, the Sky only smiles at Miss Sara Brown and says to her like this. Why, the Sky says, "Paul says, if any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise." "I love you, Miss Sara Brown," the Sky says. Well now, Dauber has a pretty fair sort of memory, and he says that Miss Sara Brown now tells the Sky that since he seems to know so much about the Bible, maybe he remembers the second verse of the Song of Solomon. But the chances are Dauber muffs the number of the verse, because I looked the matter up in one of these Gideon Bibles, and the verse seems a little too much for Miss Sara Brown, although of course you never can tell. Anyway, this is about all there is to the story, except that Brandy Bottle Bates slides out during the confusion so quietly even Dauber scarcely remembers letting him out, and he takes most of the Sky's potatoes with him, but he soon gets batted in against the Faro Bank out in Chicago, And the last anybody hears of him, he gets religion all over again and is preaching out in San Jose, so the Sky always claims he beat Brandy for his soul at that. I see the Sky the other night at 49th Street and Broadway, and he is with quite a raft of mission workers, including Mrs. Sky, for it seems that the soul-saving business picks up wonderfully, and the Sky is giving a big bass drum such a first-class whacking that the scat band in the chop suey joint can scarcely be heard. Furthermore, the Sky is hollering between whacks, and I never see a guy look happier, especially when Mrs. Sky smiles at him out of her 100% eyes. But I do not linger long, because the Sky gets a gander at me, and right away he begins hollering. "I see before me a sinner of deepest dye," he hollers. "Oh, sinner, repent before it is too late. Join with us, sinner," he hollers, "and let us save your soul." Naturally, this crack about me being a sinner embarrasses me no little, as it is by no means true, and it is a good thing for the Sky that there is no copper in me, or I will go to Mrs. Sky, who is always bragging about how she wins the Sky's soul by outplaying him at his own game, and tell her the truth. And the truth is that the dice with which she wins the Sky's soul, and which are the same dice with which Brandy Bottle Bates wins all his potatoes, are strictly phony, and that she gets into Nathan Detroit's just in time to keep the Sky from killing old Brandy Bottle.